Okay, today is May 14th, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm joined by the usual casting crew of The Pipeline, Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
That would be me.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Good day.
And there we go. Erika Barootes, Department Head of Applied Politics and Public Affairs at McNamee College. I refuse to learn your job title just like French. Because just like French, I refuse to learn it because it's too hard. So, okay. We got a good show today. We're going to talk about the Mark Carney's new, old Liberal cabinet. We're going to talk about an unemployed Easterner who's coming out west here to get a job. Sorry, that's a little mean. That's Pierre Poilievre, who's going to be running in a by-election in Battle River, Crowfoot, Alberta, the most conservative and most Alberta of conservative Albertan ridings. And our first topic, who actually leads Alberta's independence movement? A lot of people would like to. A lot of people have stepped forward. But there's no real clear voice, name, and face put to it right now. It's a constellation of movements, parties, individuals, advocacy groups, legal groups. There's a whole nebula, a whole new constellation, take your metaphor, on it. We've got the Alberta Prosperity Project, which has been around for a number of years now, which just the other day unveiled its question on what they want the referendum question to be from the Citizens Initiative ballot. We've got the Independence Party of Alberta. We've got the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta. We've got the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition. No, that's not a gift coupon. That is a political party in Alberta. We've got the Republican Party of Alberta, formerly known as the Buffalo Party of Alberta, the Alberta Advantage Party. And fitting in there is also the United Conservative Party, which has both federalist and nationalist components to it. It's a bit of a hot mess, Cory. Without getting into, without plugging your book too much. You can a little bit. But without also getting into the whole history of this thing, which goes back forever, kind of set the lay of the land. Like, has there been a kind of clear leader or organization or party that's kind of emerged in the movement today?
Not today, no. Historically, there hasn't really been one since the Western Canada concept, WestFed, back in the 80s, that's kind of held it all in one spot with these five parties, plus I'm sure the new Judean People's Front will be coming out as well. They're not going anywhere. The last election, all five of them added together, even with 18% support for independence, came up with 0.8% support of the vote. But I mean, as we know, it's white hot for the appetite for independence. People are looking for somebody to lead this and stand out. The Alberta Prosperity Project is the closest thing to it. They've been well established, organized. They've held meetings for years around the province. They have an impressive member base, but they're not setting the world on fire right now. I think for a lot of people looking for somebody to lead this, somebody to stand out and speak for all of it. I mean, it's the advantage and disadvantage of being a decentralized movement in that it is organic, but you kind of need people to keep people on an even keel. And yeah, speaking of my own book, I wrote that a couple of years ago, but I was critical of taking the partisan approach to this. And I think with the fact that it's a referendum that we're looking at, this should help people get focus on the referendum. But you still need, I guess, some sort of driving force. And while a few people are raising their hands, I don't think support's kind of consolidating around them at this point.
Erika, I mean, as we said, there's a constellation of these parties. They've traditionally, with the small exception of the Western Canada Concept Party in a by-election in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills in 1982, have failed to break through electorally. I think there's always been, if the independence is going to move, a partisan imperative to it to get the referendum. Daniel Smith has taken that card away from those parties and saying, well, you can have your referendum without the need for a new party. You can have your referendum and stay within the big blue tent all at the same time. Kind of completely short-circuiting those guys, I think, to an extent. But speaking of Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills and by-elections and the independence movement, one is about to happen right now. The Western Standard got the scoop on this. Tara Sawyer is going to be appointed as the United Conservative Party candidate in that riding. The leader has a certain number of appointments they can make, and that's often used in by-elections. Four. Oh, you would know this. You were
I was like, there's four.
Yeah, you would know that. So she's going to be the UCP candidate there. Best I can tell, she's not explicitly pro-independence. But I think it's a wildly conservative riding. It's one of the most conservative ridings in Alberta. And there's going to be a by-election there. I think it's highly likely that one or more of these independence parties are going to run. I know the Wild Rose Independence Party, which had been probably the most prominent one, well, Kenny was premier, stood down in the last election, pretty much did not run candidates, saying, this might be the best we can get. Let's give Smith a chance. I don't know if they're going to stand down now or if they're going to continue with that and give her a chance. But the Republican Party seems highly unlikely to do so. They're very hostile towards Smith and the UCP. What opportunities are there for both the parties and the movement in this Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills by-election? Because there's some history doesn't rhyme. It doesn't repeat itself, as they say, but it can sure rhyme sometimes.
Well, I feel like you just asked me 6 questions, so I'm going to answer all 6
try
and get
order.
there. Well, I do think Cory's right that it's like very good to remove the politics from it. I don't think we're going to see that realistically. I do think from the separatist or independent movement, it should be taken away from maybe some of these guys putting their hand up, being like, I'm going to be the knight in shining armor. I don't have someone in the back of my mind who could carry this without putting their own personal ego or brand forward, which I think is actually my concern with some of the people that have put their names forward or want to be the champion for this, is that it might actually discourage the movement more than it helps because of the longevity of them screaming and shouting about this. So I do think it needs to be more coordinated. There does need to be kind of an official spokesperson or an official grassroots organization that's leading this to be able to have that clear, concise message. Because even looking at the websites, they're all kind of all over the map, and it's not really sure what that exact question, with the exception of the Alberta Prosperity Project, it will look like for these groups. Now, coming hyper-local to Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills, you're absolutely going to see some more fringe candidates on this. I think that knowing these ridings, that it's risky for the premier to appoint someone there. I think it came down to timing with the other 2 by-elections that I suspect they want to call all at the same time. I do think Tara's a great candidate, long time, farmer and long time standing in that riding. So I think it was a good candidate. However, I still think from that riding, there will be pushback against the UCP of using an appointment because the leader only gets 4. And I can say that when I was president, I would say, don't use them unless you have to. Maybe they'd argue that they had to, but we will see the Republican Party putting a candidate forward and maybe some others. What does that translate into in votes? We'll see. But I think that there's some funny equations that could happen with all of these individuals putting their names forward and probably not doing as much vetting as the UCP does.
Nigel, I'm going to ask you a 2-part question. Who would be your dream leader? Who would be realistic that this person emerges or not? And I want names. Who do you think would be the best leader of this movement? 1 or 2 people. And then more realist, who do you think is the most realistic likely leader to emerge?
Well, the best possible leader would be George Washington, but he's not available. So that's...
well, hopefully it's a little less fighting than what Washington would do. But
who can tell where that path will lead? But that, I think, really is what Erika has just been saying, is that there is not an obvious leader for this movement at the moment. And I think the time will come when there is. It's going to have to mature for a bit. Right now, there are some people who are prepared to give Mr. Carney a chance to get this right. I'm not one of them, but there is a certain amount of post-election goodwill. If he actually were to meet the demands that Premier Smith has made, and you started to see decisions made that led to pipelines to coasts and the drilling rig count climbing, I suspect that much of the wind would go out of the independence movement. At this precise moment, you're right, Erika, there are far too many, I don't want to be demeaning to them, but people who, quite frankly, aren't going to be able to take it forward. And nobody, in my knowledge, has come forward and said, I'm the guy, I'll do it, I'm the girl, I'll do it, who I actually believe could take this forward. This movement is going to take time to mature. What's the second part of the question, Derek?
Well, is there someone out there right now who you realistically think could?
Well, I guess not. At this moment.
No.
But just a side note on that, there is a meeting that's been scheduled that's going to be held in about a little less than 2 weeks. It's been invited by I can just say a central organizer who's pulling some of the voices and presumed leaders of the movement together into one room to try and see if something can be hammered out or hashed out or moving in the same direction. So, well, I'll be attending that. We'll see if anything productive comes out of that. Some of these questions might be answered there, or maybe we'll all just beat on each other for a while.
Well, you know, that's the thing about conservatives. We're also highly principled that we can't possibly yield on a point, can we? Well, we'll see, I guess.
Well, Cory, I want to come back to you on the by-election here. Smith has been trying to keep the independence question. It's impossible for it to not be political. It's inherently political. It is mega political, but she's been trying to make it not partisan. And there's a difference sometimes in those things. What opportunity do you see for the independents, the explicitly independence parties that are going to want to contest in that riding? Is there any opportunity for them here? Because I mean, they got to be looking at this, praying for a repeat of the 1982 by-election in that very constituency.
Yeah, there's more opportunity than anything else that could present itself for them with any other riding. This is a gift of all places, Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. The difference, though, now is there is a vent for the independence-minded people. In the 80s, there was nowhere else to go. You either voted with the PCs, who were staunchly Federalist, and there was no referendum on the horizon. Now, independence-minded people have been provided with the ability to call or have a referendum called and put it to the question, which I think is going to make it a little harder for an independence party to get steam. I mean, the others are all small and they really don't have much further, organization. The Republican Party has been jumping out, but I don't know if they've exactly been endearing themselves to people. And their messaging is very much on the 51st state thing, which sort of at least has that feel with it, with a Republican name that they've adopted. So if anything, they've got a chance of high expectations and falling on their face potentially, which would set them back, because this is if they can't do well in this constituency, they can't anywhere. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to perform, this is their one and only shot.
I suppose it's a risk too. When you stand in a by-election, if you fail at it, it takes any maybe perceived wind out of your sails. Which is why, when I served in the legislature 2015 to 2019, the Alberta Party never contested a single by-election because it would make clear to the media that they were not a real political party. It was a couple of
Nenchi's pals.
Yeah, it's essentially a couple of Nenchi guys, of Redfordites. They intentionally did not run in any by-election, even in ridings where they on paper should have been competitive, like in Northeast Calgary, because it would expose them as a paper tiger. So I think there's some risk for them in that. So speaking of by-elections in Alberta, as I think rather rudely put it, but I just couldn't help myself. There's an unemployed man out east looking for a job coming to Alberta. All hell for a basement. Pierre Poilievre is going to be running in Battle River, Crowfoot. I could be wrong, but I think it might have been the biggest conservative margin of victory in the country.
82%.
82%. I want to know who the other 18 18% of degenerates are.
The RCMP are already looking for them.
Yeah. Rat Patrol is on the lookout. But I mean, these rural conservative ridings, conservatives just kind of run up the score, and it's kind of an internal bragging rights within caucus about who's got the most ridiculous North Korean style margin of error. Margin of victory. Nigel, is there any? I don't see any conceivable situation where Poilievre actually loses that by-election. It isn't just not in the cards. But is there any risk for him running there right now while the independence question starts to burn?
Well, he's going to get asked about it for sure, but then he's been asked about it already, and he's given a very, political answer to it. But he has firmly placed himself on the side of federalism. He's not running to be a renegade. He wants to be prime minister of the country, and he'll get his chance to run again, I'm assuming, after the leadership review. So I'm not expecting any interesting headlines coming out of that whole thing. What I am going to be interested in is where he decides to set up shop. You need a kind of a visible presence in the riding that you're representing. Does he mean to rent a house there and visit occasionally? Do constituency office surgeries on Saturday mornings? How exactly is that all going to look, and how is that going to play with Anna, who appears to be a big city girl with big city tastes? She looks good in a cowboy hat at the Stampede. Is she going to adjust to life in just coming to small towns a lot? We'll see. I wish them well anyway.
Yeah. I don't think there's any expectation they're going to live there. I don't even know if they're going to rent a place, but because Poilievre, it's very strongly implied Poilievre will not actually run there in the next federal election, that the incumbent MP, is it Couric? How do you pronounce his name?
Damien Couric.
That he will probably want to come back, but that's potentially 4 years away. Carney has won, arguably, depending if Elizabeth May is Speaker of the House of Commons, 2 or 1 seat away from an effective majority government. This could run out a full 4 years very easily. So I don't think he's actually intending to stand there in the next election. I think he's going to want to probably go back, maybe to Carleton. We'll see. I guess I'll put the same question to you almost as I asked in the last part, Cory, is there any opportunity for independence candidates here? The Wexit Party, which was already poorly named, doubled down on bad names, changed its name to Maverick Party because there was a movie coming out. The party was a total flop. And has actually been deregistered now. I would have thought they would have held on to the registration for a future day when they might resurrect the fight. They probably thought Poilievre was going to win and it wouldn't go anywhere. So joke's on them. But an independent candidate, not independence, independent candidate's not going to stand out there. The longest ballot committee is already promising they're going to try and flood the ballot with candidates as they did in Carleton. They'll probably have less success in a riding out there because you actually have to get out there and get signatures. It's a lot harder to do. But there is no registered independence party on the federal level, the way we have with the Bloc Québécois, things like that. Is there any opportunity for an independence supporting candidate there in that by-election?
No. There's no registered entity. As you said, it's unfortunate if there was ever a break that Maverick, as they hung around kind of waiting for the right circumstances was about to come. It was when alienation was high and they could make the case saying, look, we need to go back to like the Reform Party roots and just have regional representation because we're throwing ourselves against the wall in the East. And in that riding, I don't think they could have taken it in their, greatest dreams, but they could have had a respectable showing of that segment of the population. They could probably twist the knife a little bit too on saying, hey, this is going against the principles of local representation. Find a local candidate, say this person will be there to represent you for the next 4 years, not just dropping by now and then to cut a ribbon or ride in a parade. But there's just nobody there. There's no apparatus. And as we were kind of talking about before too, there's no person of profile who could say represent independence and just run as an independent and stand out. So aside from maybe Maxime Bernier is going to try and throw everything he can at it, but I don't know if it's that fertile for him there. It's just going to be a non-remarkable cakewalk for Poilievre to get into the House of Commons.
Erika, is there anything remarkable about this by-election that could stand out? And as I asked Nigel, What are the risks for Poilievre? Of course, he's going to get asked about independence. He was asked about it, I think, just the other day, and he says, "Well, I get the frustrations, and I'm going to remove the appetite for independence by, fighting for things that are good for the West." And I mean, he said what you would very much expect him to say, like that you can't run for prime minister and also support the independence of a different part of the country. That's a contradiction in terms. But are there any risks for Poilievre in a riding like this? And are there any potential opportunities for these candidates or movements?
Yeah, no to the other individuals. Like, this is, as Nigel said, the God's country of conservative politics with 82%. He was almost actually acclaimed until the day of official filing. Damien had no contenders, so he would have been the first guy. I was out door knocking with him at Edmonton Centre, and he's like, I might be the first person since like 1985 or something to be acclaimed in a federal general election. So I don't think it's worth anyone's organizing for 5% of the vote to knock him down under 80. Like, I just can't see anything. And for the people that see him maybe as a parachute candidate, who doesn't want the leader of the opposition and potentially future prime minister at least being in your riding for a period of time?
Carleton.
Well, the people at Carleton are all bureaucrats now, and that's why they know that they're getting fired with Pierre Poilievre. The only thing, I mean, again, I don't know if someone was running for prime minister of Canada, why they would ever say that they want to separate. Like, I think it's a non-starter. However, the interesting dynamic will be how he and the premier navigate a lot of these situations. I mean, he was very aligned with her, but on items, if separation does come to fruition, CPP versus Alberta pension plan will be on the table, and all of those types of other questions that are trickle down that Pierre has already said, I don't support Alberta getting their own. And so that would be a little bit more difficult for him to navigate that when he's in the province as his seat. But I mean, those are all hypotheticals down the road too.
No, I don't. I think those are good points where he was maybe able to brush them off a little more easily than he could as an Alberta representative. All right. Well, let's, speaking of all of that mishmash, let's talk about the new Carney, I say new in parentheses, Carney Liberal cabinet here. Some of it's old, some of it's new. One of the major news networks was reporting that Chrystia Freeland was going to be left out. I found that hard to believe because that would be seen as a declaration of war. And I guess by the standards of the Trudeau cabinet, she was not the dumbest of the ministers.
Okay, can I ask why you think that's a declaration of war?
Well, when you exclude someone of that high profile, you're saying, I don't actually really want you here. Please just find a gig in the corporate sector and trigger a by-election. That we would have been sending that message. I mean, when she was minister, she'd been minister of finance and deputy prime minister for a long period of time here. I think that would have been a bit too fighty. As it turns out, she was in. So is Stephen Guilbeault as Minister of Canadian Identity and things like that. So he's in charge of continuing media regulation. It's a job he's had before. It was a bit of a too hot a potato, I think, to keep him in environment. But the new environment minister
was actually his parliamentary private secretary for a number of years, and also did the same job for Wilkinson in ENPR. Now she's the environment minister. So she's
Julie Debruzen.
That's the one. So she knows the staff, which is important. She knows the different regulations they've been trying to work on. That's a very dangerous appointment in my view.
So the premier.
From our point of view.
So let's
go ahead, Derek. You go. No.
You're
the host.
Let's tease that out a bit, Nigel. I think, I mean, speaking of declarations of war, if Carney had kept Guilbeault in environment, he would just be, he's opening the door for Alberta to, he'd be such to say, please go. Mm-hmm. So I think he had a bit more tact than that, but he did put someone who does appear to also be an eco-radical in there, just not named Guilbeault, kept Guilbeault in cabinet, but potentially balanced it off with the environment, the new energy minister, Tim Hodgson. Some people have said nice things, that this person is not crazy, that this is a person who's not ideologically opposed to pipelines. in Liberal governments, the previous 3 terms of the Liberals, the environment minister has unofficially outranked the energy minister, however. They both sit around the cabinet table, but one on a lot more heft than the other. How hopeful are you that maybe that relationship's changed, that the energy minister is going to take a bit more prominence now that everyone's worried about the bad orange man at the south?
I'm not that optimistic at all. I'm sorry. There's a part of me that wants to be just because I want it all to go away. But look, a lot of the mainstream media have been doing this narrative about the old and the new, and, oh, this is a new administration and things are going to be different. No, they're not. This is the old script. And what they have got is some new people. Some indeed have never even been in Parliament before, and now they're in the cabinet. But when you look at the 4 main, okay, this is an arbitrary Hannaford definition of what's important and what isn't. But when you look at the 4 main ministries that we're concerned about at the moment that are going to drive the agenda for the next 4 years, you're looking at energy, environment, finance, and the Treasury Board. Now, most people don't think of the Treasury Board, but it's actually the most important one of them all because they sign the checks. They tell you what you can afford to do and what you can't afford to do. Well, you know, Mr. Carney has got his people in those ministries. That is going to be the inner cabinet, and it is the old script that they are playing. I don't know where Tim Hodgson stands on the important pipeline issues. I know he's had corporate relationships with pipelines in his job with Hydro One. He's certainly a smart guy. He'll be a quick study on all the issues. But what's he doing there? He is an old friend of Mr. Carney's from the days when Mr. Carney was governor of the Bank of Canada, and Mr. Hodgson was an advisor to him. So there's a relationship there. They obviously think in sync. And now you have an activist environment minister, and you've got I find this a really, Philip Champagne is kind of he's a sort of the fixer for a number of ministries. He'll do what he's asked to do and enjoy doing it. He's liberal. And then you have this absolutely unknown person, Shaftar Ali, who has had 1 term in Parliament, held no parliamentary posts, no committees recorded, and there he is as president of the Treasury Board. Now, I don't know. Maybe he's a former realtor. Maybe he has a grip on what the Treasury Board does, or maybe he's prepared to be advised by the people who are already there. But I don't know how strong a voice he's going to be within that little group of 5, being Carney and the 4 ministers. So I actually have got a feeling, to answer your question, that this is not going to be good. That in 6 months' time, we're going to have a clear sense of direction, and I would like to know which of the 5 people I've just talked about, the Prime Minister and the other 4, are going to be the ones who say, let's build a pipeline and let's put it here. That doesn't sound like any of them.
I would add one list to the inner cabinet there. That's the foreign affairs minister. Or is that called foreign affairs again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Global affairs.
Oh, it's still global.
Sorry, yeah.
Global affairs.
Okay, still global. Whatever. It's the foreign affairs minister. That's normally a pretty important one, but it's particularly now with the raucous relationship with the Trump administration.
Mhm.
So I'd put that. I'd add that to the list as well as the inner.
But I would.
That's the thing.
I would add, Derek, that even the Prime Minister himself has come out and said, like, yeah, that's their role, but the president is going to deal with the Prime Minister, and that's my job. And he said it quite snarkily that he almost dismissed, I think, his foreign affairs / global affairs minister. So he already cut them down a notch.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, he's not wrong that, executive to executive, that's a direct relationship. But a lot of the groundwork is normally laid by the foreign affairs or global affairs minister. And seemed to be like, don't worry. Okay, I know she's silly, but I'm in charge. That seemed to be what he was saying. Let's talk about a new cabinet portfolio here. Evan Solomon is, who knows the exact title of? This is a new one.
Yeah, it's got to do with artificial intelligence.
It's like AI and digital future or something.
Mhm.
We'll put the formal title on the screen here, but it's a bit noticeable, and it's a funny thing. I don't think this actually disqualifies the guy for the job. Not that I particularly know what the job is, because it's a brand new job. But during the campaign, he retweeted a fake AI image of Mark Carney with a bus, and instead of saying liberal, it said retard. I'm sorry. For those watching on cable, this is just the news. I'm reporting what happened. It was the retard bus. I mean, it was a silly mistake, and I don't think it disqualifies the guy from anything. But it was pretty funny that he shared that out, obviously accidentally.
He needs media training.
He needs to be able to recognize what's clearly a fake AI image, and he's now the minister in charge of AI. Erika, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. There's been a contracting of cabinet portfolios, which I think is a good thing. And Carney's now got more ministers of state on these little DEI and particularly political gimmicky portfolios in many cases, and concentrated down the cabinet to 28. I think that's actually, a little credit where it's due. That's a good thing. It's still a big cabinet by Canadians, but by Canadian standards, it's compact. But anyway, this position here, is this a real thing? I don't know. What is it? Or am I on the retard bus?
I think they do call it the Minister of AI. Either way, that's what media is reporting it as across the board. If you had innovation, tech, all of those other buzzwords, it honestly just seems like they needed a job for him, and they didn't want to give him anything really he's at the big kids table, but not at the big kids table. So I don't know. I think it was, I don't actually have as much criticism as maybe everyone else on this. I do like the smaller government. I do like that they've put the economic portfolios at the top of the list, and kind of, like you said, downplayed the DEI culture, all that stuff. The one thing I did want to point out, though, is the underrepresentation in Western Canada. And I get that you had like low numbers, but there's significant reduction in representation. You've got the Saskatchewan MP who has that, as we learned on election night, a very large riding. Buckley Boulanger will be a Secretary of State, and MP in Edmonton Centre, Eleanor Alzweski, being at the cabinet table as the Western kind of lead. But yeah, I think that one's kind of a joke. I don't know what deal he made Evan Solomon in advance, but it's almost like he was kind of like, haha, F you, as a joke, to give him this portfolio.
So you really anticipated where I wanted to go with this, was kind of cabinet representation for the West. Canada, I think, arguably more than any other country in the Western world, has the most Byzantine cabinet appointment system. And this goes back to Confederation. This is not something you can blame Carney or Trudeau or Harper or even Mulroney or the first Trudeau with. This goes back to Confederation, because Canada was such a polyglot to put together. You had French, you had English, you had Protestant and Catholic. That used to be a big thing. And then you had regional representation, and then you had ideological representation. And so the cabinet in Canada is really always ranked like the best man, the best woman for the job. It was a fact. It's always been a factor in there, but far from the decisive factor. And I don't know, the last 50 years, it's gotten wildly out of control. But Carney seems to have largely kept that cabinet-making convention intact, except as it involves the West. I think I'm not going to spoil your parting shot on this, but there is one minister. The Liberals elected only two people in Alberta: one Calgary, one Edmonton. The Edmonton one is a very junior portfolio. It's Western Economic Development. It's essentially it's the pork barreling. It's essentially a pork barreling ministry where they like to hand out some money, and so that Liberals get to stand there and cut ribbons once in a while. It does nothing. It's just a waste of money. And it's extremely junior as a portfolio. That's representing all of Alberta. And I thought it odd Nigel, that they left out Cory Hogan. Cory Hogan was elected as the sole Liberal in Calgary Confederation, when that seat vacated from Len Weber. I don't really know the guy, but he's always struck me as a reasonably intelligent, not totally crazy Liberal, New Democrat. He's been in both. I was surprised to see him excluded. The minister, I forget the guy's name, from northern Saskatchewan. It's a third to half of Saskatchewan. It's a gargantuan constituency.
Buckley
Boulanger.
Yeah. I think also a fairly low level portfolio. And it's the first Liberal elected there in a couple of election cycles. It does not appear that Carney has made Western outreach in his cabinet building a priority, both by excluding Cory Hogan, the Liberal elected in Calgary, and by the two in in Alberta and Saskatchewan, giving them extremely junior kiddie cabinet table positions.
Sandbox. Yes. This business of putting together a cabinet when you have to recognize this interest and that area and this persuasion and this, they're always going to say they pick the best people for the job. But whenever they come out, as Mr. Carney did, and claim to have actually met a certain demographic target, which he said we have achieved gender balance, you then have to think, and I mean this in no sense to be a personal reflection on Eleanor Olszewski, because I never met her. I don't know that I hadn't heard of her before this, or on Cory Hogan. But you've got to look and say, when the Prime Minister says we achieved that target, was it a question of, well, we've got two in Alberta, one man, one woman, we need another woman? Maybe it was that simple.
Yeah, Hogan's got the wrong plumbing. He had a quota to fit.
So,
Well, you could just identify and get the cabinet.
yeah, well, and it's kind of sad that it comes down to that. The idea that you're picking the best people for the job and then claiming to have met a certain quota. You need to go through the cabinet actually and just see whether the various ways that they can be divided up fit into some kind of template of the demographic breakup of Canada. I haven't done that yet, so I'm not accusing the government of doing it. But the very fact that those questions can be raised is a weakness in the system.
It's Erika. I almost feel like there's a DEI and not just DEI, but like kind of an identity bingo card, and you get points. I got this race, I got this religion, I got that gender, and I got that region, I got that language, and you get points. So like the three white guys sitting here, we're worth nothing.
I got one.
You're marginally above nothing. You got 1 point.
You know what? This comes back to the minority of gingers that are very underrepresented in the House. I should have 2 points, just saying, but
2 points.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're okay. You think you're a 2-pointer.
Okay.
I mean, look, if it wasn't clearly that they're still playing the points bingo card here, I'd say I do think the regional representation of the cabinet table probably out of the point system probably makes the most sense. Religion, Protestant versus Catholic, going back to Confederation, makes a lot less sense. Language, okay, I'll give a little bit for language, but region really does matter here. And on it seems that out of that the bingo scorecard for the points you get before you're a cabinet minister, region, at least as regards the West, must rank very, very low on that scorecard in this cabinet making.
Oh, for sure. If you look at Atlantic Canada, they have 5 ministers and 1 secretary of state. Like, for how many seats, they're really winning the day compared to Western Canada. I will argue, though, on the regional representation. I mean, we had Randy Boissonneau, and tell me one thing that he voted for that represented Western views.
We got 2 representatives for 1 there. So
Yeah, yes, double Randy, R squared. But this is the problem is like you check a box of regionalism, same argument with the Senate. They appointed people that are never going to vote in the interest of to reflect Albertans. And so, I do agree there should be regional representation. Nigel totally took my parting shot on the equality, but I'll come up with another one. I'm quick on my toes. But I was going to say, as a female, I hate that idea that I would only get a cabinet position if I was Eleanor versus Cory. Like, you got to sit there and say, oh, did I only get it because of, to Cory's example, like my parts are a certain way that gives me the advantage. Like, that sucks. That to me is not equality. That's a handout. And so regardless of if you deserve it or not, there's always that would always be lingering in the back of my mind. So that's unfortunate. But, just because you're a woman doesn't mean that that's the perspective you're always leading with. So I kind of disregard the regional thing, although you want to have a voice at that table, but it doesn't mean that they're a true voice for the region in which they represent. They're just geographically there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, see, that's what happens when you don't tell me what your parting shot is before we
I
start.
did tell you guys. I announced it before.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah,
none of
I
us.
did.
No,
Well,
no,
none of you
of us-
listen to me. You don't listen to me.
No, we didn't. You're only 2 points. You're gonna need more points before you pay attention.
Get ready for my parting shot.
And that's it for the show. We're out of time. Okay, well, we'll move you to near the back of the list. Parting shots, Cory.
Well, I mean, as we watched Honda basically saying, thanks for all the subsidies, but we're not going to build any electric vehicles in Canada. Something that kind of got overshadowed, though, on the failure of trying to subsidize your way into prosperity is Trudeau's brilliant London, Ontario cricket factory, which was going to make tons and tons of bugs for us to eat. $35 million went into that. By the time they pulled the plug on it, it looks like they're $41 million in debt at that. So just as another stark example of the stupidity of federal government spending, federal government investment, or any government investment typically in business. I mean, really, go out on the street if you're trying to make a business model. Ask how many people do you want to eat bugs and see what you get out of that. And somehow they said, this is a brilliant business model. Let's put some money into it. So that one's done. I can't wait to see what stupid thing Carney puts our money into.
And what do the Liberals have to say for themselves? Crickets.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, guys. That one wrote itself. All right. Nigel, your shot.
Yeah, just let the crickets loose in London, Ontario.
Yeah, set them free.
We're coming back to regional representation here. I was cruising the internet this morning and somebody pointed out something I thought was worth passing on. The little town of Brampton, Ontario, which has a population of 750,000, has 6 MPs and 3 of them are in cabinet. The 2 provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta, population 5.2 million, have, as we've just discussed, 2.
Two very junior.
In very junior positions. So, I don't. When we're talking about how to build a cabinet and what you're looking for, I'm actually not sure what they were looking for. Why Brampton had to be so overserved? Maybe they're just really brilliant people. I don't know. Anyway, there you go. I can't wait to hear what Erika's got to say.
Erika, I'm gonna. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Great.
Oh,
yeah.
Am I gonna like it? I don't know.
No. My parting shot today is to Derek and Nigel, is to be smarter. If you're going to pick selective hearing, don't pick a fiery redhead.
All right. My parting shot is to WestJet. WestJet, I used to love you. You used to be my main. I used to love publicly hating on Air Canada, and God, you just kind of became so much like them. I want you to get back to your roots. WestJet has had to pay $65,000 in damages to an employee that they fired for being unvaccinated, even though that employee was working from home. Couldn't possibly infect anyone, if you believed it was even effective in that. They were working from home during COVID, and that was not enough. They did not get vaccinated and fired them. $65,000 They've now been this person's been awarded $65,000. It's justice, long delayed, but I think this person has been given 11 months of their salary or something here. I mean, COVID's behind us now, but some of these legal cases are finally making their way through the system. So big businesses, the next time everybody loses their mind with the latest witch hunt, remember that some people are not going to take it laying down. All right. Well, that's it for today's Pipeline. Nigel, Cory, Erika, thank you very much for joining it. And thank all of you for joining us on the Western Standard's Pipeline today. Remember, the Western Standard is Western Canada's leading independent media outlet. We rely on people like you to support the work that we do. Please go to westernstandard.news right now. Don't wait. Do it right now while you're watching, right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for all access to all Western Standard content. Get past that pesky paywall, and you'll be supporting the great work that our folks are doing here. Thank you very much for joining us today, and bless the West.